Hi there. I thought I'd start a series of videos where I show you various search techniques and me doing searches that I haven't done before, so you can see my process as I go along for various problems that I come across. And I'm using searches for my own family here. So when I come across like a common difficulty in genealogical research, I am recording my searches and showing you what I do. Now, in this particular case, I was looking for a line of my family who are the Pickerings of Yorkshire. And I've always been sort of rather interested by this line because I had a great 3 or 4 times great uncle, Christopher Pickering, who was quite high status at one point. And I wanted to see if the family line went back to the actual town of Pickering and whether they had any kind of importance in that area. But as you'll see, I have got a bit stuck at the sort of early part of the 18th century. And what this particular video shows you is the dangers of making an assumption about a particular baptism and the things you can do to either confirm a baptism you suspect might be the right one or to eliminate it. And, all the different searches you can do to try and find out which is the right one. Was I successful? Well, let's have a look. Right, so here is my Pickering ancestor that I have traced back to Appleton-le-Street, which is a little bit north of where his son went to live and started a family in New Malton and Norton-by-Malton in Yorkshire. And this Matthew, as you can see, was born in 1742 in Appleton-le-Street, not too far from Malton. And so I found that his father was Matthew Pickering, and he was married to Elizabeth Harper, and I have their marriage here at Appleton. In 1731, Matthew Pickering and Elizabeth Harper, both of Swinton, were married. Now, Swinton again is just very closely in this area. So my next step was to try and go back and see if I could find the senior Matthew Pickering's baptism. And this is where it gets a little tricky. I'm going to go to Ancestry first. Go straight to birth, baptism and christening. So Matthew Pickering. Now, with Ancestry, slightly annoys me that you can only search for 10 years either way, either that or you have to leave the year open. So what I tend to do is sort of work back and think of the good 20-year range in which a person could have been born. So he was married in 1731. So I would usually say a good 10 years either way of 1704. Now if I put in, so the marriage said of Swinton, so I tried putting in Swinton. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that people were born there, it just means they were living there at the time. So Swinton, Yorkshire, but I'm not going to put exact on there. Let's just see what comes up. So as you can see, at the top of the page we have a 1710 baptism, which looks absolutely around the right date, certainly, and also the father's name is Richard Pickering. And if you look at my family tree maker page, he names his first son Richard. Now that's always a good sign. Naming patterns, it's not always an exact thing, but it's very, very useful because naming patterns were often very important to families. So I would have gone with that, except The only slight doubt this puts in my mind is that this baptism is in Sherburn in Elmet. Now, if we look on Google Maps, when I'm researching, I always have Google Maps up on my computer. It's a really good idea when you're trying to find people's birthplaces before the census, because it really helps to see where places are. So as we can see here, we've got Appleton Le Street here. Just down the road is Swinton. So Matthew was married at Appleton, was of Swinton, and his son lived around Moulton and Norton. So when this came up, Sherburn in Elmet, I had a look to see where that was. S-H-E-R-B-U, there we are, Sherburn in Elmet. It's much closer to Leeds. Now, if we just zoom out here, so I've zoomed out quite a lot. Sherburn in Elmet is way down here near Leeds, and the area we've been looking at is right up here. Now, of course, there's absolutely no reason why he couldn't have come from there, and it's on a very sort of main road circuit, you could say. But this always gives me pause to stop and doubt. Of course, people did move around at this time, very easily could have come from there, but also very often people stayed within the same vicinity. So whenever I find a baptism in this time period that is quite a long way from where they were living, I do try to look for other documents that might just confirm that we are on the right lines. You know, I think the fact that his father is Richard, we could have a look also, we need to have a look at the original copy just to see if there's any further clues on there. There we go. Matthew, the son of Richard Pickering of Sherburn. So he was living in Sherburn in Elmet. So it doesn't give us any further clues there. Let's just have a look. There was another Matthew Pickering that came up here, 1707. Let's just have a look at this. And this is Askrigg in Yorkshire and the son of Michael Pickering. Now that's even worse, because I don't see any Michael Pickerings in the children of Matthew. And Askrigg is even further away, I think, than Sherburn. That is up in the Yorkshire Dales, and Moulton is right down here. So yes, that is even further away. As you can see, we've got Moulton here, and Sherburn is round about here, and that is even further away. So the fact that it's even further away and the father is Michael, I think that's very definitely probably not the one, and that's away in Cheshire, even further away. So I think this is the most likely. But we have to remember that parish registers don't always survive. Sometimes they might be illegible or damaged, and therefore there's always the possibility that my Matthew Pickering was baptised somewhere around Moulton, but for some reason or another his baptism record is not showing, because if the register has been damaged or is illegible, it's obviously not going to show up in the indexes. Now, when you get these kind of results, it's very tempting to want to then go ahead and prove that the person you found is the right one. But in fact, the professional thing to do, and it's kind of counterintuitive in a way, the first thing you want to try and do is actually eliminate this person and try and prove that they're not the right person, because that can actually save you a lot of research time later. If you can find straight away that they are not the right person, then you're not going to spend lots and lots of time trying to find other reasons why they are. So the way we do that is to try and find out whether this Matthew Pickering died in Sherborne or around Sherborne, or perhaps married around Sherborne. Now, looking for a burial is always going to be a much wider date range, so I prefer to do this on Find My Past because it gives you that option. So let's have a look. Use the name variants there because there do seem to be some. So if we have that Matthew Pickering born in 1710, we could look. I mean, he could have died as an infant, he could have died any time after that. So we'll first look 40 years after 1710. So we go to 1750 and then do 40 years either way. So that gives us a good 80-year age range of death for this person. So Sherborne. We have 5 results. And will you look at that? Right at the top, we have a burial in 1786, year of birth, 1710. So that has saved me a lot of time in trying to find more about this Matthew Pickering, because we know that my Matthew Pickering died in 1767, and this one, year of birth, coincides with the one we found in Sherborne, and he died in Sherborne. So we can be pretty sure that this is the same Matthew Pickering that was baptised here. So that effectively eliminates this Matthew Pickering from my tree. And in fact, to be doubly sure, I looked at marriages as well, and I found this marriage in 1739 in Aysgarth, which is very close to Sherborne, and just below it, of course, is my Matthew's marriage in Appleton in 1731. And they went on to have several children, so you can tell by looking at those dates. This is going to be the one from Sherborne, and it's, again, not my Matthew. So, what do we do now? We do not seem to have a baptism for my Matthew. When I'm carrying out research for clients, I usually use a combination of Ancestry and Find My Past. Very often I'll find something on one that I haven't found on the other. So I will have a look at Matthew baptisms again. And their search page is a little bit different. Put in Matthew Pickering. In this case, if you click the box, you get the variance, it's the other way around on Ancestry. I don't think we need to do that to start with. We might try that in a minute just in case, but let's try again with that year of birth. Now, one of the things I like about Find My Past is you've got a much wider search range. So we could do 20 years if we want. We go back, so we could do, let's say, 1700 and do a 20-year search either way. And let's have a look at Appleton again. Appleton, the street. And no results. And the other thing I like about Find My Past is that you can search within a radius of a particular place, and we can just move that over, and again you'll see whether there are any results. Move that over to 20 miles, 50 miles, we get 10 results, and I have a feeling that what's going to come up. Right, we've got several Matthew Pickerings, a couple of them with the Latin name of Matthew Matthias, and that's a little too early. We've got the one in Asquith and we've got the one in Sherburn and Elmet. I think all the others are a bit too early. One thing I will usually do is look at, if we go to the National Archives website, it's always a good idea in, when we haven't got the census to find other clues, and, obviously the birthplace is one of the most useful things on the census, but here we are over 100 years before the census, so we don't have any of that. Sometimes it's a good idea just to see if anything comes up on here. The National Archives search catalogue will not only bring up documents that are at the actual National Archives, but will also bring up an index of documents that are at various record offices. So this is a very good overall search for documents, other than the usual things on Ancestry and Find My Past, such as parish registers, etc. Now I have to say, I do find the search facility on the National Archives a little bit clunky. You can only put in exact words or phrases, so if you've got a name that's going to have a lot of variants, then you're going to have to search several times with those different variants, and it doesn't give you a lot of criteria to work with, so it's not an easy search, but it's useful. So let's just try Matthew Pickering. And let's go for the 3 places we know him from. We know he was in Appleton at one point, we know he was in Swinton, and he may also at some point have lived in Moulton. I won't use all of these because that will just come up with exactly, might not give us what we want. So let's give a possible lifetime date range. So he was married in 1731, so let's go back as far as just 1690, just in case. Probably going to, and we know he died in 1767, so let's have a look at that age range. Or you can also put in it's usually about a century if you want to look for somebody in one whole century or more. So let's just see what comes up with that. Absolutely nothing. And I could go on and maybe do some name variations, but nothing comes up. So I could fiddle around with that, but I'm not going to right now. It's just to show you that's one thing you can do. And sometimes things will come up on a National Archives that wouldn't come up on Ancestry or Find My Past. For example, land documents, marriage settlements, very often documents that are concerning people who own property or have some wealth, etc. But there is nothing coming up for Matthew. And just to show you the difficulties of searching in the National Archives, I've just tried using the name of Pickering in the exact word or phrase with the same place names. And what comes up? The trouble is when you've got a surname that is also a place name, then what it picks up is a lot of documents with the place name. And also down here I've got Appleton as a surname, so you end up picking up a lot of documents that you just don't want, so you have to sort of go through it. So I'm not awfully fond of the National Archives search page. I'm just going to look at all the Pickerings baptised within 5 miles of Moulton around this period. Let's just see what comes up. 62 results. There's a lot of them around here. I've got Abigail, Caleb, Jacob, gosh. There's Cram, that's another place fairly near Moulton. So I'm just looking to see if there's anything like Matthew that could have been missed before. Samuel, William, John, Maria, Parsifal, yeah. Puckering, that's another variation. That's interesting. And Robert, but no Matthew there. So, interesting. So, we can see from this that the Moulton registers are pretty solid. If we just look at the pages, also, this is another thing you probably want to check just to see what condition they're in, whether there's any possibility of illegibility or damage, and they look pretty sound. So it doesn't look as though, to me, that if Matthew had been baptised in Moulton, that he would have been missed out. What I also want to do is just have a look around Appleton. I know it's very close to Moulton, so it would have come up around there, but I just want to look more particularly around the Appleton area for any Pickerings baptised around that time. Let's put in the name variants too. So let's go just 20 years around 1700. Probably should cover it. So let's do Appleton, Street, 5 mile radius. Let's just see what comes up there. Again, we've got all those ones that we just saw in Moulton. I ought to have a look at that one that doesn't have a name, because that could, of course, turn out to be Matthew. Let's just see what else we've got. Barton Street, John. Yes, it's all around Moulton. So I'm just going to have a look at this one. Could this be... Right, it was... Sometimes they're difficult to find. It's the Parsifal son. Oh, son. Parsifal is a man's name. Interesting. And that's another Richard Pickering, you see, that I suspect, because Matthew did name his first son Richard, I suspect that this is another Richard having children in Moulton. And I suspect that Matthew may well be his son. Let me just check that date again. It's definitely the son of Richard, and it's the 10th of June 1696. Let's look at the original record. So always worth, if you can't find the person you're looking for, if there are any baptisms you can find in the area that don't have the full name, it's always worth checking them to see if you can find it. 1696. So we've got that Parsifal. But I cannot find any other one. I think what has happened here is that the person transcribing onto the index has not recognised the name as Parsifal and left that blank, and another transcriber has put that in, so it doesn't look like it is my Matthew. But, however, it is interesting that there are children of a Richard in New Moulton, and I do wonder whether Matthew is the son of this Richard but has just been left out of the baptisms somehow. The next thing I would like to do, what I usually do in these kind of circumstances, is look at wills. Now, if I was south of Yorkshire, I'd be usually looking at ancestry for Prerogative Court of Canterbury wills and other wills that are not PCC wills. I'm not going to go into all the complications of wills in this video. However, you should know that for Yorkshire and north of England, it would not be PCC, it would be PCY. And the index of these is on Find My Past under birth, marriage and death. and we go down to wills and probate. And this will bring up the index from the Borthwick Institute at York, which holds the Prerogative Court of York wills. Now, because Matthew does name his eldest child Richard, and because we know from the previous searches that there was a Richard in Moulton having children around the time that Matthew should have been born, I am going to look to see if there is a Richard Pickering will. Now, obviously, for him to name Matthew in his will, it's got to be within Matthew's lifetime. So we want to give, let's go 1740 and do 40 years either way. And I'm going to go to Appleton again. I did see earlier, I haven't videoed this, but I did see earlier that there was a Richard Pickering who was buried in Appleton, which is why I'm going straight there. No results. Let's just go a bit wider. No, nothing for Richard, unfortunately. We could go... don't think he would be much older than that. Okay, let's try that. No, there's nothing around Appleton. Let's just try them just without Richard for all Pickering wills then. So we've got 17 results around here. And I'm just going to go back and do that again. 14 results. And the interesting thing is, I did note this before too, when I was previously searching, there is a will for my Matthew, who died in 1767. That is certainly something I'd want to look at. Unfortunately, with the Borthwick Institute wills, you can't view it. That's just the index. You have to actually order the will from the Borthwick Institute for a fee. So I wouldn't be rushing off immediately to get that will, because he's unlikely to name his father in his will. Occasionally that does happen if the parents are still alive, and or sometimes I've seen wills where somebody names a parent because they've inherited property from them, but it does not happen very often, so he's unlikely to name who his parent is. We haven't got anyone specifically in Appleton or Moulton here. We've got an Alexander in Cram, various other places around Appleton and Moulton. There's nothing there I particularly want to be rushing off to order. We could try looking in Ancestry, just in case. Go down to wills and probate. You wouldn't get the PCY wills turning up here. Let's try. I won't put I'll just put a vague date of 1750 here, because you only get that 10-year either way thing on Ancestry, which does annoy me. So we've got a PCC will there. I don't know, but it doesn't say where it is, so it might not be. It might be a bit vague. No, we've only got. We haven't got any Yorkshire wills there. It's not surprising, because it's they're all going to be at the Borthwick Institute. But you know, it's always worth unturning every stone. What do I do next? Just one more thing we can try for this period is, if we go to education and work in Find My Past, we can always have a look to see if there are any apprenticeship records or other records. I'm going to leave it covering all of these, but I'm mainly thinking of apprenticeship records here, because if somebody was in a trade, if you can find an apprenticeship record, sometimes the father might be named in the original bond, and sometimes the father is the master tradesman employing his son. It's always worth checking apprenticeship records when you're trying to find the name of a parent. It's a long shot, but you never know. So let's look for Matthew. Name variants now. People were usually aged 17 at the time of apprenticeship, so we're probably looking around the period of about 1720. Let's say 21, 10 years either way. So he was married in 31. And I haven't even put in a place yet, and there's no results. So that doesn't give me anything. But that one, it's just always worth a shot. And what we can also do when we're really scratching the barrel is just to do a search all records. We know his date of death, so I'll just put that in. So we've got his marriage, which I've seen. That's the baptism of his son Matthew, and that is his will, and that is his burial. There is a Matthew Pickering who married in Bulmer, possibly could be another candidate for his father, but really this doesn't tell me anything. So we are here at a bit of a brick wall, and I've shown all the kind of normal searches I will do, but I could carry on just playing around with the dates, with name spellings, and, going into, I've sort of glossed over some when I've got a list of names up previously, because I don't want to make this video overly long, but I could look at all the different possible the people who are having children around Moulton at that time. We know there was a Richard, but have a look at other people who are having children, and we can then start to make educated guesses at who Matthew's father was and go from there, and also use the have a look at the names of Matthew's children and see what other names came up that were similar to that. And sometimes you can then gradually piece together a possible family, and it's not absolute 100% evidence, but sometimes you can get an absolute likelihood as opposed to an absolute definite. So there you are, complicated one, and it's interesting that I started off pretty sure that I had found the right Matthew, though it's very, very important that we do not make assumptions. When we find a baptism in, a sort of wide area and don't find a baptism in a specific area, that we don't make the assumption, because it's the only one we've found, that must be the right one, because there are all kinds of reasons why the right baptism might not have shown up in the indexes. And it's possible he wasn't even baptised. This happens sometimes. People just forgot. So I am at a little bit of a brick wall with my Pickering research, which is a little bit frustrating. But it's one of those ones that I might keep picking out, if you'll pardon the pun. And you never know. Sometimes if you just keep going, looking at name variations and marriages, I could order that will, etc. There's all kinds of things that you can just carry on doing to try and make your way through that brick wall. And maybe I will, maybe I won't, but that is genealogy for you. Anyway, do let me know if you have any further thoughts on this, and I will endeavour to do some more searches around particular problems, and it's quite fun to do this, carrying out searches and recording my search as I do them. So And do let me know if there's any particular problems. I'm not going to do a huge long search on this. And usually I charge for long searches. But if you have a little brick wall I could do a quick video on, then do let me know. Anyway, there you go. Not quite as successful as I would have liked, but just does illustrate the complications of searching for ancestors before the census.